depending on what time zone you happen to be sitting in. I'm David Rottkamp, and really thrilled to be with you, with my esteemed colleagues here today to participate in BoardStrong's first roundtable of 2026, the Board Chair Roundtable. I come to you with just about 39 years of experience working in the nonprofit sector as a CPA. I am the practice leader for Grassi's national nonprofit practice here based out of New York City, but work nationally, and have an opportunity and have had the opportunity and still do sit on 5 boards, of which I am board chair of 2 of them right now as well, including BoardStrong. I'm recently appointed by my colleagues on that board as of January 1st of 2026, and really thrilled to lead a wonderful group of folks at the BoardStrong board level. This session really is going to be about sharing success stories, sharing challenges, and sharing innovative solutions that our colleagues here are going to be talking about. And I have the pleasure of moderating some topics around leadership, CEO partnerships with board chairs. We'll talk about board engagement and accountability, navigating uncertainty. We'll spend some time talking about strategic focus versus operations, how to compose a sound board and what the policies are around that, maybe some overall questions around governance challenges, and we'll maybe finish up if we have some time around culture, trust, and advice to new board members. So a lot of things we're going to be covering today. As Barbara mentioned, please add your questions into that chat box that we have down there. We will be moderating it as part of today's session, and I'll ask those questions if you have something specific to the topic that we're talking about right at that point in time. So please feel free to drop them in. Otherwise, we'll save some till the end. So with that, Susan, why don't you kick us off and introduce yourself, and then Darise, and then Ron.
Yeah, hi, I'm Susan Jefferson. I'm the board president of Rochester Women's Network, or RWN for short. We are a nonprofit organization with the mission of enhancing the professional lives of our members by giving them opportunities to support, empower, and inspire each other through trusted business connections and authentic relationships. We are a completely volunteer-led membership organization since COVID, and we have been in existence since 1978. We'll be celebrating our 50th anniversary in 2028, and we're really excited about that. While we provide professional development and networking opportunities, and there is passing of business between our members, what we consider our most important benefit is the opportunity for relationship building.
Hi, everyone. I am Darise JeanBaptiste. I'm the co-chair at Mind Builders Creative Arts Center. We are located in the Northeast Bronx, where I was born and raised. I'm an alum of the program, proud to be here to talk about the wonderful programming that we offer for youth and families. We provide free and affordable programs in the areas of dance, theater, folk culture, and music. And Mind Builders is also celebrating their 50th anniversary in 1978. Very excited to be on this journey with them. I've been in a co-chair role for only a year, but I've been on the board for 5 years. And I got reconnected to Mind Builders back in 2020, right just before COVID hit, with our founder, Madaha Kinsey Lamb. My work in the nonprofit sector began 19 years ago. I currently work at Change Impact as a senior director of program narratives. And I work in this sector where we build other organizations' capacity. So I feel like, my experience working with other nonprofits and championing youth development really blends well at Mind Builders. So thanks again for having me.
Great. I'm Ron Abad, CEO of Community Housing Innovations. We're a large not-for-profit in New York, over 700 employees, 125 million. We're in New York City, Long Island, Hudson Valley, Westchester. We do everything from homeless shelter, affordable housing, supportive housing, home ownership, property management. I've been CEO for 5 years. I've been 30 years in the housing sector, both in not-for-profit and government, former assistant commissioner during the Bloomberg years. Just like David, I serve on 5, 6 boards. Actually, I was counting them again this morning. I serve on 5 boards and have been a secretary, treasurer, and chair. I'm chair of the not-for-profit Westchester, very prominent coalition of all not-for-profits in Westchester County, over 300 not-for-profits with a great leader, Jan Fisher. and very excited to be part of this panel.
Right.
I've been chair
Wonderful.
for 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know Ron and Darise, you both come from, okay, of course, nonprofit backgrounds. So that transition to serving on boards, was, I would imagine, somewhat seamless. Of course, different roles and responsibilities. But Susan, again, I'm gonna go right off script, Susan. Look at that first question, right before. Well, so much for pre-planning, right? Because something popped into my mind as we got started. You work in the commercial sector, so you don't work in the nonprofit sector. So yet you're board chair of a nonprofit organization. Tell me what that was like as you transitioned into board service and ultimately into board chair. Was there any challenges or issues that you had in coming over, or were you able to manage that fairly seamlessly?
I think I was able to manage it pretty seamlessly. I have 20 years at Xerox Corporation and a joint venture of GE Capital. So I had lots of business experience that I brought to the group, and especially relationship building, working with others, all kinds of problem solving, training. And I think that served me very well coming into this position as board chair.
Wonderful. That relationship building is one of the real important parts of being a board chair. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later on. So why don't we start with you, Susan? Why did you want to become board chair? What factors did you consider in that approach?
Well, as I said, being part of a joint venture between Xerox and GE, I had lots of training, which, at the time probably wasn't that exciting to me, but through the years, I realized how important and valuable that it was. And I think it gave me a good grasp on leadership. And I was also involved as a leader in the Xerox Women's Organization. And I felt that everything I learned being a part of that group as well could be applied as board chair of Rochester Women's Network. And in the early years of my RWN membership, I saw the difficulties that the organization faced as the leadership changed. And at that time, our president was turning over every year. So my biggest focus as board president has been on succession planning and making sure that the organization is sustainable into the future. And we've done that by using technology to help automate some of our processes and developing procedures so that we don't have to recreate the wheel every time our leadership changes.
Thank you for that, Susan. Darise, how about yourself? What led you to become board chair, and what did you think about as you entered that, what was offered that opportunity?
Yeah, so 4 years into my role as a board member, we had a co-chair step down. So I thought to myself, can you do this? And I said, yes, I can do this. And so I raised my hand for the role. And thankfully I work with a really supportive board, and they were definitely supportive of my transitioning into this leadership position. And at Mind Builders, we have a co-chair model. So I work alongside my co-chair. Her name is Latoya Westbrook-Kaling. She's really wonderful. And she comes from the corporate world. So I'm from the nonprofit world. She's from the corporate world. So we definitely blend perspectives as a team, as co-chairs at Mind Builders. And I also thought about time, whether or not I had the time and capacity to
Right.
do it. Definitely had to kind of shift a few things and think about how that would fit into my schedule as someone who works full time and who has other creative pursuits. I'm a writer myself, so just figuring how committed I could be, and I was able to step into it and totally commit. So
That's a really important factor, is a
yeah.
time commitment to any board role, whether it's board chair or just serving as a board member or a director. Are you able to commit fully to that in that endeavor that you're supporting? Darise, what gave you the confidence, as you said, to believe that you could to raise your hand and say, I can do this?
I think being on the board for 4 years and observing the way that it operates and kind of understanding like, oh, this is kind of the flow. This is the process that the board usually takes. This is our rhythm. And feeling confident that that was something that I understood deeply gave me the confidence to step in and say, I don't know everything, but I'm definitely willing to learn. And I feel like, working alongside our executive director, Shirley Taylor, who's been really wonderful. She's also a lifelong learner like myself. I think that lended to it being an environment where I could learn and grow.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing all that. Ron, how about yourself? You're why board chair, and what did you think about?
Yeah, I served on the board of directors of not-for-profit Westchester. It was a pretty smooth transition One, a dynamic executive director in Jan Fisher. So it was very smooth to continue to support her. Two, the way we're structured, not-for-profit Westchester is actually board members are CEO and EDs of other not-for-profits. So we have about 25 other board members who are just great partners, very passionate about Westchester County, its residents, their industries, sectors. And we're all passionate about supporting not-for-profits and really helping people out. So for me, it was just a natural, smooth transition and continuing my personal mission and professional mission to serve and support our communities.
That's one. That must be some board meeting having 25 CEOs as board members that you're leading as well.
It's every industry, aging, senior,
yes.
Youth, housing, very dynamic leaders, very strong, experience, etc. So being part of that board and just moving on to board chair. And I succeeded a great board chair previously, Richard Nightingale. So it was a pretty good synergy moving forward.
That's wonderful. And I know Jan Fisher, fairly well as CEO of nonprofit Westchester. So that kind of leads us to I think our next question that we outlined is around CEO partnership. And how do you maintain a healthy partnership and relationship with your CEO that doesn't necessarily cross the lines and have healthy boundaries and all those things around micromanaging, macromanaging, and that whole process? So how do you step into that role and responsibility?
Well, for me, I think it was smooth. I know clearly it's role clarification. The purpose of the board or board chair is not to manage, not to micromanage, not to run the not-for-profit. We're there to support. We have a fiduciary responsibility, a duty of care, a duty of loyalty. But primarily, I believe really to support the CEO and the executive director. Be there as a source, as a feedback group to really support moving forward. So I know my role. My role is to serve and support Jan Fisher and all the other board members. And her role, Jan's role, is to run the organization with her leadership team. And board members are to use our experience as CEOs and EDs to support her in order for us to meet our mission, which is to help and serve the people of Westchester County. So role of clarification as a board chair, I'm very clear that we don't manage not-for-profit Westchester. It's Jan and her team, but we're there to support, raise funds, et cetera.
Thank you. And that's an important, there has to be kind of a line in the sand that as a board chair and as a board member yourself, you have to know which side of the line that you're on. And I do a lot of work with the National MS Society. So we're orange. So we call it the orange line. And as the board member is not crossing over the orange line into managerial aspects or interfering with the business model itself, outside of the strategic concepts that they're bringing to the table. So great story.
Exactly.
Darise, how about with you? What do you think about as it relates to your interactions with your executive director?
Yeah, I definitely think about consistent communication and transparency. So the way we have it set up is where we meet monthly via Zoom to talk about wins, red flags, priorities, and requests. And we also use a shared document, and that keeps us accountable. That helps us document our progress, but also, just track questions in between the times that we are not meeting. And so having that consistent communication definitely lends to a partnership that, where there's an open door policy, but there's also an understanding that, this is our scheduled time to meet. We don't have to, operate in an energy of urgency. We have time set aside to really discuss important pieces that are going on in the organization. And I think that's definitely helped with boundaries in our partnership.
Wonderful. How often does your board meet throughout the course of the year?
We meet quarterly, but we also have committees that meet in between the quarterly meetings.
Okay.
And so we're able to get work done between those quarterly meetings for sure.
That's great. So having a quarterly board meeting, but having monthly connections with your executive director allows you, again, to the things that you talked about. And what I like is the idea of having the set agenda and knowing that you have something to talk about. And that's important, not just meet to have a meeting. So Ron, do you meet with your CEO on any cadence level as you became board chair or right now, or just as needed? How do you do that in your
no, we have a standing bi-weekly conversation or meeting every Friday morning, common agendas, and periodically she reaches out, I reach out to her on anything. We stay very connected on the pulse on a weekly basis, but a formal meeting on a bi-weekly basis.
And I think that's really important. And where I'm board chair, the two boards I'm on, we meet bi-weekly. one of the boards that I was previous board chair on, I was actually meeting because the executive director was new to the organization. We were meeting on a weekly basis every Monday morning at 8 o'clock for 30 minutes. And it was just to help her on board in her role as well as part of a national association. And we pull that back to every 2 weeks and ultimately to once a month. But having a regular cadence, I think, is really, really wonderful to create the relationship between the board chair and executive leadership. And that allows for that easy transition of information going back and forth. So, Susan, let's turn another question over to you and your volunteer-led organization. And as board chair, we should be thinking about board engagement and accountability. Do you have well, that's a tough question to ask. I presume you have an active board. So having an active board is wonderful, but what are the strategies you employ to ensure that they stay active during those meetings and maybe outside of those meetings as well?
Yeah, as I talked about before, first and foremost, building relationships and making sure that each board member feels free to share their thoughts and opinions. As a project leader in my Xerox days, I led many projects with teams of people who did not work for me. So they really didn't have any reason to show up to the meetings or take action items. So my strategy was to ask questions and to learn about the team members, learn about their families, their hobbies, likes and dislikes, as well as their areas of expertise. So this helped me to build relationships with the team members as individuals and for me to understand how they could best contribute to the project. And I think that the same applies to the Rochester Women's Network Board, getting to know my board members, giving them the opportunity to get to know each other, as well as understanding their area of expertise and how they want to contribute, has helped us to build relationships, which keeps us all engaged and excited to work together.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And board engagement. And Susan, how big is your board? Once again.
Yeah, 12 members at this
12
time.
members. So that's an average. I would say it's an average size board. I mean, some we see very, very small. Some we see much, much bigger than that as well. And each board composition in terms of size is dependent on the type of organization you are and what your needs are of your board. So there's really no right size from number of board members, but the key is engagement and having those board members that want to participate and those that want to share stories and ideas to help you be strategic in the approach of the organization. Ron, how about yourself at NPW? How do you keep 25 CEOs engaged as board members, or they probably know how to just keep themselves engaged?
Oh, no, yeah, they're highly engaged because it's personal impact. Our mission, our objectives are to strengthen the not-for-profit sector, right? To help out in capacity, capability, networking, relationships, advocacy. So we have a very strong and active, very highly experienced, very dynamic board. They're personally invested not only for their own sector and their own organization, but the entire sector. So it's very engaging, and I appreciate that. And I just love sharing that because everyone, it's a common mission across the board. So.
Absolutely. If you have commonalities and people are there because they want to be, not because they're being forced to serve by a corporate requirement like that, then they tend to be active, and that's what you want to have. Darise, how about yourself?
Yeah, 2 years ago, we had a board retreat facilitated by Barbara Paxton, who was really wonderful working with us. And she helped us identify which committees we wanted to launch, to initiate for our organization. And so we decided programs, finance, governance, and development and external affairs. And so those committees are where our board members definitely shine outside of the board meetings that happen quarterly. And the committees are a really great place for people to bring their expertise from their real lives, from their work, in whatever field that they work in. And it's also nice to see some people who join multiple committees. So there's that cross-ideation that happens. And then at the quarterly board meetings, we have a report out where we can kind of talk about what some of the work and accomplishments that the committees have made in their time in between the board meetings.
Wonderful. Have you had or have you experienced in your board chair, co-chair role, a board member who hasn't been engaged at this point?
Ooh. We have some people have, personal things going on in their lives where they're not able to be on a committee or they're not able to attend as many board meetings as we like or the standard that we set.
Right.
And in those cases, I found it's been helpful to pick up the phone and call those people just to say, hey, we still care about you. We still want to know what's going on. And, figure out some other ways that they might want to get engaged. And sometimes that is, making a donation. Sometimes that's attending an event. But I think making those different touch points where people might not be expecting them has certainly helped in that area.
And that's, as board chair, you are the leader of the board, and having that direct reach out to board members, I think, is an important and vital part of building that relationship and checking in to see what is happening. Susan, have you had any challenges with non-engaged board members over your tenure as board chair? And if so, how have you dealt with it?
Well, we have had, I wouldn't say that we've had non-engaged. Well, it sometimes we did. But more recently, we've had board members that have become overwhelmed with the responsibilities between their personal life, their jobs, and their position on the board. Things just have gotten, too much for them to manage. So I try to meet with my board members during their first year pretty regularly, either quarterly or halfway through the year, just to check in and see how things are going, make sure they understand their roles and responsibilities. And, we are all volunteers, so we have to understand that work has to come first, family has to come first. So we try to do some of the things that Darise was mentioning. Is there another way that this person can contribute to the organization without being a board member? Could they sit on a committee? Can they help out with some event planning? Just to try to keep them engaged in the organization.
Wonderful. I like the idea of the check-ins as well. I'm a big proponent of, as board chair, working with either my vice chair or my governance committee chair, and ensuring that we have at least like an annual meeting with each board member to talk about roles, responsibilities, accountabilities, and measure volunteer performance. Again, we're all unpaid volunteers, so we do the best. We generally do the best that we can, but just to let folks know that there is, expectations of being a board member as well. I think that's really important. One of you just mentioned, strategy a little bit. I want to bounce into a little bit different approach and spend some time talking about operations versus strategy, and how you as board chair lead your boards in strategic discussions, or are they operational discussions? And what would you like to be doing? So Susan, let me start with you about that, on that topic.
Sure. Again, as an all-volunteer organization, staying focused on strategy has been difficult for us. We have several committees, and each of those committees have board representation with a VP. But many times our VPs are acting as committee chairs as well. So they're spending time on operational tasks. And what I've been trying to do in the last few years is to focus our VP positions on organizational strategy and our committees on goals that align with the overall organizational goals. But sometimes getting volunteers to take on the committee chair position has been difficult. We continue to work to recruit members to take on these leadership positions so that our committee chairs can stay focused on the operations and our VPs can stay focused on strategy.
Okay.
We're still working through that.
So you segregate the roles and responsibilities within your committees because you are an all volunteer-led organization. So you have to incorporate some level of operational activity into your volunteer work that you're doing. Ron, how about yourself?
We are a strategic board, as an entire board. We are navigating the uncertainties in the not-for-profit sector, anything from funding to contracts, to procurement, from federal, state, and local level. So our responsibility is really to be strategic. How do we advocate? How do we support the sector? How do we support individual members, 300 or so not-for-profit members who have different sectors? They're in different areas, right? Different policy priorities, but we have a strategic goal really to strengthen the sector, strengthen our individual members, really advocate with our elected officials at local, federal, state levels, et cetera. So it's a strategic conversation, strategic engagement. The day-to-day management, the day-to-day operations is really for not-for-profit Westchester, for Jan Fisher, et cetera. And we're there to support the organization to make sure that they're viable, financially viable, programmatically viable, but we're representing the interests of our members. We're representing the interests of the communities that serve all the towns and the villages and cities in Westchester. So it's strategic from a board perspective to provide not-for-profit Westchester the greatest strength it has so that it can support hundreds of different not-for-profit members. So our focus is to be very strategic.
Do you follow a strategic plan that you've developed, that has your board developed a strategic plan with management, and that's what you follow as part of your development of agenda items for your meetings?
Absolutely. But major focusing on policy priorities. These are the priorities of the organization. These are our major goals and objectives for the year, et cetera. And that really helps guide us on next steps.
Right. Thank you for that. And thank you, Susan. Darise, how about yourself? Do you have a strategic plan within your organization, and how do you define or describe your board meetings?
Yeah, we are definitely gearing up for strategic planning. So this definitely has been on our radar for a while now. We are, I would say, a board who is becoming more comfortable with diving more deeply into strategic planning and kind of those types of exercises. So as we gear up for our 50th anniversary, which will happen in 2028, we're starting to think now about how we want to celebrate that moment and thinking strategically about the financial side, but also how do we engage the community around it. And I think, for big questions like that, scaffolding them out and breaking them down into smaller chunks, I think has helped us with strategic thinking and planning in that way. So really thinking about, what is the tiny grain that will get us to like that larger payoff, and how can we start to build from now to, get our hands on the resources we need to make it happen.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm a big believer that, as much as an organization's board wants to be strategic, there are times it has to get operational, maybe to deal with an uncertainty that is popped up that you couldn't plan for, like take COVID, for example, or maybe the sudden departure of a CEO or a CFO level person or a C-suite person where someone on the board may have to step into a little bit more of assistance or support. So those are areas you think about. And then also think about the size of the board as well as the tenure of the organization. A 50-year organization more than likely has an operational structure in place that works. So the board can be strategic and organizations. But if you think of an organization that's brand new or maybe 2 or 3 years old, they may need the expertise of the board members who have operated similar business or just in general business to help them navigate that process. There's no right or wrong answer. I think the question also then becomes, and this is not something we talked about, but something I like to share some thoughts, get some thoughts shared, is around the idea of, we talked about engagement, but ensuring that the board members feel like they're heard. So inclusivity, and how do you elevate board members to speak up at a meeting versus being reported out to? So, Darise, maybe you can start. Maybe a little bit of the question we talked about, but how do you deal with either report outs or asking for input?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. And this is something that I am certainly a big proponent of, because I definitely want everyone to make sure that their voices are heard. And I am an educator at heart. And so I think sometimes calling on people, David, what do you think about this?
What I do.
Right. Or, just kind of bringing in what you already know they're working on. Like, so David, I know you had this meeting with this organization last week. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about this or that, right? So kind of thinking about engaging people in real time that way. But I think also as you're planning for your board meeting, reaching out to folks to say, hey, are you comfortable sharing just a couple of minutes on this topic? I think the board would really benefit from hearing your voice about this. And I think that definitely goes a long way versus going into a board meeting without a plan and just hoping and crossing your fingers that people are going to speak up about something. Doesn't always work that way. So I think, sometimes having just a vision for whose voice could maybe generate more discussion around certain topics has certainly helped at our board, at least.
That's wonderful. I like the idea of having some vision and some pre-planning as a board chair. It's one thing to just show up for a board meeting because you have to do that as just a member or a director, but hopefully with all the pre-read materials read. But as a board chair, you have a different role and responsibility in that meeting, and knowing whose voice you want to hear, what topic you want to cover, what strategy you want to embrace as part of the discussion, what the outcomes are going to be. It's important to kind of plan that out as a board chair to help you navigate 1 hour, 2 hour, or multi-hour meeting that you have. Susan,
Mhm.
how about yourself? How do you, you have a lot of committees that do work. So it did sound like there's some reporting out that goes on at your board, but do you have time or do you find time in meetings for input back from board members?
Yeah, absolutely. All of our vice presidents have a report out at our board meetings, and we meet monthly. Um, and we do encourage other people to speak up. Sometimes our newer board members might feel a little, intimidated, or, that they don't have anything to contribute, but we need to pull information out of people sometimes and ask questions. I mean, I know the skill sets of all of my board members, so if I think they have something to contribute, as Darise said, I would call on them and ask for their opinion. I mean, we're all there to work together, and we have to use each other's as resources. I mean, obviously, I don't have the knowledge on everything, and I need to count on my board to help me in those times. So we definitely ask people for input, and I think they appreciate that when they're asked, and they feel like they're there for a reason.
And that's a really important approach, especially since many boards have meetings virtually or hybrid now. You think
Mhm.
about the pre-COVID days, board meetings were, I mean, we sat around a room or a conference room or a table every single time. There, maybe you had one or two people on a conference call, right? You couldn't see their face, but they were on you heard their voice, like the voice of God or something out there, and on above the ceiling coming down. But now half your people could be on a video call up on a wall or on a TV, and getting them to be engaged and in the conversation is something that I believe is an important responsibility of a board chair to make sure everyone, even if they're not speaking, to Therese's point, you call them out or prepare them in advance to be responsible for something. Ron, how about yourself at NPW?
Yeah, we meet in person. All our board members are CEOs and EDs themselves. So they're very busy people. They have their own boards, and many of them serve on
Yeah,
multiple boards just like I do. So they really appreciate uh, for us to be highly organized, you know, highly disciplined when it comes to board reports, financials, reporting out all the responsibilities of a board that we're responsible. So we're very dedicated, Jan and the entire team, very principled in making sure that things are organized and given them our board structure and our culture, and everyone's engaged and everyone's passionate about a particular area and wants us to be successful, the investment, the individual engagement is there. So we find it as board chair and Jan as ED, or to have everything laid out and have our committees, our governance committee, our finance committee, our policy committee really be highly organized in their respective areas. So the discipline is important at our level, no matter what size not for profit, the level of organization reporting out, particularly on board reports and financials and programmatic. That's part of our responsibility to oversee that and to guide the organization is highly critical.
completely agree. And that's, all three of you have mentioned board committees quite a bit.
Mhm.
And I would believe that all three of you would agree that fully functioning, engaged, and active committees is the crux of having a really productive quarterly or monthly board meeting, because a lot of the
Absolutely.
legwork gets done at the committee level. So, Ron, as
Absolutely.
board chair, do you get involved in committees, or do you allow the
Just
committees
the
to
just
function on
as
their own?
just the executive committee as board chair,
Okay.
right? And then each committee has its own lead, and they report out themselves. And then we sort of generate a sort of a larger report that includes all the policy, the priority, all the committee reports, and then we drive that as part of the larger board meeting. So it's very disciplined, very organized from the committee structure, but everyone has the right to be part of any committee they want, based on the year, and that way it drives our general board report. But
Wonderful.
as board chair, I'm also chair of the executive, which
Right.
sort of hides right there. So
I mean, as a board chair, you can't. I mean, you can try to do everything, but
it
it's
can't be
highly it's
everything.
highly challenging, especially if you are doing this as your volunteer work with your, with a career that you're also executing as well. So,
Okay.
Therese, how about yourself in your organization? You have active committees, it sounds like. What's your level of involvement with the committees, and how does that function at your company?
I do serve on committees. I serve on the Finance and Development Committee, and we meet depending on the season. Sometimes we meet monthly, sometimes we meet quarterly. And so it is another layer of time and
Right.
commitment that is certainly involved in my role. And I think that part of that is because we have 12 folks on our board and we have 4 committees. And so, we're kind of spread out, right? But we are working to recruit more board members so that, we can have more hands in more places. But otherwise, the committees that I don't serve on, I'm able to check in with those folks either through email, and we, have time in our quarterly agendas for them to report out to us.
Wonderful. That's a lot of time. People are often talk with me, because I meet with boards all the time in my role as a CPA, presenting to boards and to committees. We're stretched so thin, the boards, because they may not have a board of, they only board of 6, 8, 10, 12 people, but they have 4 or 5 committees on top. So it seems like everyone is just doing double and triple duty. So that's where you have to really think about the size of your board and what your bylaws and governing documents allow you to grow into. If you want to have that active committee structure, not burn out board members, you have to find a way to balance having the right number of board members and get the execution you need at the committee level in order to be strategic and focused at the board meetings.
Absolutely.
Susan, how about yourself? Getting active committees, you have to because you're volunteer led. Tell me about that and what's your level of involvement as board chair with these committees.
I do participate on a couple of our committees. Our marketing committee, it's something that I was a VP of marketing at one time during my time on the board, and I'd like to be involved with that committee. We've done a lot of things together, and I just want to stay in touch with what's happening with them, as well as our membership committee. Just keeping in touch with what they're doing. And we do ask our board members to participate on a committee, at least sit on one committee. They don't have to chair the committee, but at least just to keep engaged and understand what's going on in our different committees.
Yeah, so I would imagine all 3 of you have a mandate for members to serve on committees as well,
Yes.
as part of your governing documents. And I think that's a smart move, especially if you have active committees. And while I think we'd all promote having active committees, the size of your board has to be able to absorb committees. If you have a board of 3 or 5 people, you just may not be able to have an effective committee structure, which then means you have to change the tenor of your board meeting to some extent, and the board chair has to adapt and adopt a sound agenda to get through everything that needs to get done at a board level versus at a committee level. So a bigger hurdle to overcome or to get over as part of that work. Let's stay with the board and talk a little bit more about board composition. And Susan, you talked about succession planning earlier. So, you had success in that really, and that was really a good thing. Is there anything that you wish you would have done differently in your succession planning?
Well, we currently have a process of board recruitment that begins with an informational meeting about the August timeframe before we do our process of bringing on new board members. And I started doing this about 3 or 4 years ago, and we talk about the leadership positions within the organization and the roles, responsibilities, and the time commitment for each. And prior to establishing this informational kickoff meeting, we had very little interest from our membership in taking on the leadership roles. And we think it was because people didn't know what the expectations were. So as a board chair, I'm constantly talking with members at events and assessing their engagement in the organization and their commitment to the organization, as well as their skill sets for potential leadership positions. And that would include board positions as well as committee chair positions. And I encourage my board to do that as well. So as an organization, I think what I would do differently, and what we have started doing, is making succession planning a part of our monthly board agenda to keep it in the forefront. So in the past, we didn't think about succession planning until someone left the board. But now every month we talk about it. We look at our org chart, we look at our committee structure, all of our committee members and chairs, and we talk about, do we think anybody's going to leave a committee? Do we have anybody that we think would make a good candidate for that position? So keeping it in the forefront of your board meetings, I think, has really been important to us and helped us to prepare for the next level of leadership.
That's wonderful. I'm seeing more and more nonprofits add succession planning to their agendas, at least a couple, if they have 4 meetings, at least a couple times a year to keep it top of mind and talk about board succession as well as organizational leadership succession as well. And look, board chair, I do think has a responsibility in ensuring that there's at least strategies around succession being thought about by the board. So, Darise, how do you think about recruitment, diversity, and succession planning at your nonprofit?
Yeah, first I'll just say I love that idea from Susan to put it on the agenda. That's something that
Yeah.
we could definitely probably benefit from. In terms of recruitment, one of the questions that we ask ourselves is what perspectives are missing from the board and maybe which ones are overrepresented. So, that's a very candid conversation, but I think one that's really necessary to have, especially if you want your board to reflect your community. And so, thinking about, where are the age, gender, class, experience, geography,
Yep.
generational, differences like the gamut, and thinking about how we can tap into those places. We've had the opportunity to work with Youth Inc. and Core Strategy to find board candidates, and they've been super helpful for us. So these are organizations that are youth Inc. especially is very focused on youth development. So finding people who are interested in working on boards that work with youth and in developing youth and their skills. And thinking about onboarding too, I think has been super important for us. So not just getting people on the board, but how do you get them acclimated to our culture? How do you get them invested? How do you get them signed up for a committee? And these have been super important questions that we've been asking ourselves, especially in the last year.
Wonderful. Great takeaways. Ron, how about yourself?
Well, we represent Westchester County. Westchester County is Yonkers, White Plains, Mount Vernon, Scarsdale, all the towns and villages and cities all throughout Westchester County. We represent arts, housing, youth, senior services, YMCAs. So that's the also diversity, right? So our board needs to represent the communities, the villages, the cities, the towns, all throughout. So we are highly diverse demographically. We're very, very, I think we have a shining model and example of CEOs and EDs from all backgrounds, right? Or ethnic or gender or backgrounds coming from different towns with different experiences. So the board has to be diverse demographically, diverse in experience, in competency, in ability. That's the primary thing. And I think we do a great job. So that also drives our recruitment. If someone moves out and we need to recruit someone, we're thinking what sector is not represented, what area is not represented, what population is not represented. So that drives, and it's demographic, it's diversity in experience. And we believe that diversity and experience and competency and demographics really gives us the greatest value to serve the people of Westchester County. And I think we do an awesome job, but not for profit Westchester.
Sounds like all of you do some sort of gap analysis or
Yep,
individual demographic analysis. I think that's an important part, including even a skill set analysis.
That's right.
Because depending on your type of nonprofit organization, knowing who you might want to serve on your board, even from like a professional industry or a geography or a neighborhood or something like that, you want to think about those things as you roll through that, and that's a big role of what a governance committee is. But of course, the board chair has oversight into that process as well. So there was a question that's been raised around using a professional interim executives when there's a succession planning challenge. Have any of you ever had to work with an interim outsourced exec or just an interim internal exec as part of your board chair roles?
I've not. No.
I have not either. So Barbara, sorry we can't help you on that one, but I'm sure you can speak to us, and Barbara can speak to Barbara, and she can help you with that one. All right, let's turn over to governance challenges, and let's think about that. So, Susan, tell us about a governance challenge you faced as board chair, and how did you handle it? And what lessons did you learn from it? Do something differently, maybe.
Well, I think the biggest challenge I faced when becoming board chair was having a board made up of folks that didn't have board experience, including myself. So we did have bylaws, of course, and we were given a large board book that we were encouraged to read, but it was when one of the board members suggested we looked into getting outside help, and that's when we engaged BoardStrong. And we worked with Barbara for training, and I've actually made that training part of our yearly onboarding process so that new members understand the responsibilities of being on a board and why governance matters. Excuse me. And feedback from our board members has been extremely positive. Many reporting that they were glad to have had the training and felt that it helped them prepare for their board position.
Wonderful. Darise, how about you?
Yeah, it's sort of a challenge, but really adopting a new set of bylaws. I'm going to talk about
Okay.
that. So just, it's a process. It takes a while. It's not an easy thing to do. And I think that, luckily we had a few board members who were definitely signed up for the task and went through it with a fine-tooth comb and made the updates where necessary. And one of the major updates was increasing the number of board members allowed for the organization. And that definitely has opened our eyes to our need for a recruitment strategy, but also a need for our onboarding strategy. And so, just want to highlight the fact that, some challenges uncover other challenges or uncover other needs that the organization might not be addressing in the moment. But I think at the end of the day, it was a good exercise for us to get more familiar with the bylaws because sometimes
Oh,
they
yeah.
sit on the rack and they collect dust. So I think that was really, really important for us and yeah, something that has made us, I think, stronger organization overall.
Great example. Thank you for sharing. Ron, how about yourself?
Not-for-profits all over the country, particularly in our region, are, in uncertain times when it comes to funding and politics across the board. Many not-for-profits, face significant funding cuts. We are still obligated to serve our communities. We are mandated. We are primary providers, and in all our communities, we don't stop serving. We don't stop helping out, even though the funding streams may shrink, may change, may alter. So for me, the challenge is really to continue to support our leadership and the board to stay focused, and we can't solve every issue. We're limited, in capacity, right? But to stay focused on what our priorities are. And our priorities, not-for-profit Westchester, is really to support our members through advocacy, through capacity building, trainings and seminars. But the challenges are coming left and right in many of our industries across the board. And sometimes we can't directly address them, but the best way is for us to focus on our strengths and supporting our not-for-profit sector and the people that we serve.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ron. So, I mean, I had a challenge once, and we have 10 minutes left to go in our session today, and great dialogue. I'm sure we can go for longer and longer if we had the opportunity to. But I remember as board chair one time trying to get term limits put into place.
Oh, yeah.
Try getting a 30-year veteran of a board to want to adopt a set of bylaw changes to adopt term limits when you're the new 3-year person on the board who's 30 years younger and what whippersnapper. What did you know about board service? So I remember that years and years and years ago. But I mean, the takeaway that I used even at that early age in my board service career was to really just kind of peel off one by one the board members and have the dialogue and explain why it was such an important change to the governance of the organization and get the buy-in at the individual level so that when I realized it wasn't going to work at the first board meeting or maybe the second board meeting, by the time you greased the grids a little bit, you got the buy-in from others and ultimately ended up with enough of a majority to get that term limit process in place. So there's some takeaways there as well. Okay, so we have 9 minutes now. Let's think about advice to new board chairs. Susan, where would you start with that? What's the one bit of advice you may give a first-time board chair?
I think the best piece of advice I could give is to spend time building relationships with your board members. As a volunteer organization, we sometimes have to remind ourselves that we are all volunteers. We can't always do every initiative that we would like to. but having in-person time together is very important. And one of the ways that we've been able to do that is to have one board meeting per quarter in person. So instead of on Zoom, where we bring in food, we have dinner together before conducting our meeting. And it gives us the opportunity to learn more about each other, integrate our new board members, and to strengthen our relationships and our commitment to move the organization forward. And I really think that building relationships is key.
Wonderful. Ron, any ideas for advice for a first-time board chair?
Sure, I encourage you to reach out to the COED, to other board members, and really take tours, go out to the sites, go out to the programs, get sort of a firsthand understanding of experience of what the organization does. What's their core, what is their missions, what are their programs. That'll give you sort of frontline insight on why you're a board member and what's your role as a board member, and really support, because all of us are there to support the people that we are providing service for. That will refresh you and sort of hopefully give you insight into why you're doing this.
That's a great idea, getting out and visiting sites as well. It's even just as a board member who's been around for a while, sometimes doing site visits can reinvigorate and engage the juices, as they say, to why you're doing what you're doing. Darise, how about yourself? What's your takeaway for a new board chair?
Yeah, I would say share your vision. Share your vision with your board. Let them know what you hope to achieve in your time. Let them know what you would like to update or enhance, what you think could use a little refresh. And what are the things that you find are working? And then, open up that dialogue so you can also hear from your board members about what's on their minds and what they're thinking and what they expect of you. I think that's a really great way to kind of get in there, get it
I
done.
think that's great advice. Being a new board chair, being able to share what your expectations are of the board and what your vision is, which of course should be in alignment with what the organization's vision is as well, but what the vision is for the board and for your board meetings and expectations. Really important to level set. And I think that's really important, especially if you're replacing a board chair who's been there in a long tenured environment.
Right.
And I've been through some of those as well, where I became a board chair of someone who was a board chair for 10 or 15 years. And it was really done one way for the 10 to 15 years. And I was going to come in and change it completely, roll it up. I had to explain myself right off the bat what I was looking to accomplish and why I was looking to it. Not that anything was done wrong, but my vision was going forward. Let's also spend a last minute or so on culture. We do have a couple of minutes left, and this is maybe a good way of wrapping up our day today. Ron, how do you cultivate a culture of trust, transparency, and constructive dialogue?
Yeah, I think a common theme, a word we've said, is relationships. It's really getting to know your fellow board members, getting to know the leadership team. That builds trust or culture, understanding, networking, right? A board is there responsible really to support, as I mentioned, but the relationship building is key, and that will drive the culture.
And building trust, I think Susan has a great idea about building trust. It's through social interactions as well.
That's right.
And getting board members to get to know each other. In your organization, probably a lot of your CEOs who are board members know each other from their work and their responsibilities, but they all may not know that. But finding opportunities to bring them together outside maybe just a board meeting, a social activity, a dinner, or something like that, builds that trust amongst yourself as a board. And then in my opinion, board members are more apt to be open to other ideas and alternative ideas coming from their colleagues on the board, because now they have a built-in trust from social interaction. So thank you for that. Darise, how about for you in your organization, and even to management as well?
Yeah. I'll also kind of tie it into one of the questions that came in about helping a first-time ED ease into their role. I think this definitely relates to culture, where you know, everything doesn't have to be about documents and spreadsheets and meetings and calendars. It can also be about like, how are you doing as a person? So taking that person out to lunch, setting up some time to sit down and have a coffee. How are you doing? How are you easing into the role? Letting your ED know that you are concerned about their well-being, I think is definitely part of the co-chair's role, board chair's role too, because you want to hopefully retain your leadership, right? You want to invest in that person and their time with the organization. So, I'm a big proponent about like pouring into people as human beings. That, we're just not worker bees. So finding out who people are, what makes them tick, letting them
Right.
know you care about their well-being, and how can we partner together, I think goes a long way.
And to me also why they want to be part of the board, well, part of the organization, right? What's their motivating factor for wanting to be included? And Susan, I presume you must deal with this even with your fully volunteer-led board around that culture of trust and cultivation of open ideas. Imagine as well, right?
Absolutely. It's really important for us to do what we say we're going to do. And once you have a track record of keeping your commitments, that helps build the trust. And, I definitely have a board of folks that definitely do what they say they're going to do. And that's what really makes it easy for the rest of us to all do our part and keep motivated.
That's wonderful. This was a great 60 minutes, folks. I think we shared some wonderful ideas to our audience. I gave them a lot of good insights for first-time board chairs as well as ongoing board chairs as well. And I thank each of you for your leadership in your professional jobs, but also your extended leadership in your volunteer jobs as well. You're all amazing individuals and do great work for the volunteers, for the boards that you serve on. And it's been a pleasure to be with you the last hour and to get to know each of you during our planning sessions as well. Thank you, all three of you. Barbara, we're going to turn it back to you for final conclusion.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you all. This has been a truly fantastic session. I've put some resources in the chat, and you will all get a recording with some resources as well. My contact information will be on it. Please, anybody in this group, if you have more questions about what we do or anything along those lines, please feel free to reach out to us and save a place for our next roundtable discussion, which will be August 24th, and we're going to talk about board recruiting for diversity. So that will be really fascinating as well. Again, thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.